Assalamu alaikum, brother. I watched your recent live with Hiwa, Iron Fit Coaching, and I wanted a fatwa and don't know who to ask. First of all, I'm not going to give you a fatwa, sis.
How dare
But may Allah
you?
bless you. I recently reverted to Islam, alhamdulillah, despite my father being a Muslim. I grew up in the UK and was not taught anything about Islam. I frequently went to church with my mother and lived with the rest of the non-Muslims around me. Since becoming Muslim and practicing the deen, I have learned that becoming a mother and raising a family is a very important goal in my life now. Allahumma barik, may Allah bless you. My father and his side of the family, also Muslim, however, view my education as the most important thing. Before explaining to my father why I will not, he was willing for me to take on the riba student loans in order for me to go to university. Oh my God, bro. That's one advice that you give all the brothers and sisters, bro. If you could do something without debt, do it. You know,
Yeah.
like you are going to war with Allah and His Messenger sallallahu for riba, bro. Like it's not a joke. I recently expressed my views of motherhood being number one to me above any career to my father and his uncle. They both got very upset and used words such as selfish, crazy, stupid in response to what I told them. SubhanAllah, she did the most selfless thing she could do, which is dedicate her life to a family. Okay. They explained how success only comes from pursuing education, and that without it, I would have no value as a woman.
What?
Because I would not be able to contribute, no man would want to marry me. And without an education, I would not be respectable, and thus would have to marry a husband who would treat me like an object and leave me and my kids. Okay, I don't know where they got that from. They asked me where Islam says that motherhood is more important than a career. I gave them the examples of the Prophet's wives, and they responded with the answer that we should apply Islam in a modern context, as we cannot live how the Prophet ﷺ used to live. Understandable. My father stressed to me that if I wanted to become a housewife, stay at home mother, pursue my Islamic education, and not pursue secular Western education, that he would be immensely disappointed. I asked him how I were to prepare for motherhood if I were to invest all of my time, energy, and a huge amount of money into university, and he replied with, "Sounds like it's your problem." I'm in my last year of high school. SubhanAllah, she's probably like 16, 17, right? And I'm applying to universities this year. I feel as though I need to go to university to please my father, as I am afraid of angering him and thus angering Allah. But at the same time, I want to work on my akhirah, investing in my Islamic education, preparing for motherhood, and pleasing Allah, instead of chasing the material aspects of this dunya. May you please make a video about this topic to give some advice and help all the sisters in the same situation. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala make it easy for every brother and sister that are facing difficulties. Ameen. Jazakallah khair. May Allah reward you. Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Allahumma ameen. May Allah make it easy indeed. Bro, I just wanted to take a second to just let all the sisters that are in this situation know that I can only imagine how difficult this is, bro. Because a lot of times, bro, as men, as brothers, we can kind of just make executive decisions in our life, drop out of school, do whatever we want, and there's not really backlash. Like, yeah, your parents might give you ish for that. They might give you lip service for that, sure. But it's like you are your own wali, if that makes sense. You get me? But then when it comes to the sisters, it's very difficult. You know, so I do like, obviously, we all know as Muslims, obedience to the creation, such as your father, does not supersede obedience to the creator. In the sense that if your father wants you to go to uni, free mix, haram, take riba, and all that, you don't have to listen to him. And you shouldn't listen to him because it's haram and you have to obey Allah. At the same time, though, if you're under his roof and your provisioning, your sustenance, your security all depends on him,
Mhm.
you might even fear being disowned. So I can only understand how difficult that situation might be. So, Dino, what do you think about that?
What specifically do you want me to address?
I want you to address essentially imagine that you got this DM that I got. What would you say to a sister like that? What could you say? Is a better question.
You know, it is. There's multiple things that she said that each need addressing individually, if that makes sense, right? Firstly, is the concept of pursuing motherhood at the age of 17. I would say if someone's going to university, that means they're they're 17 on the cusp of being 18. Then the next thing is going to university, right? So again, to address the first thing, I think overall, to just be honest and to call a spade, I think this is an emotional DM. I think once the emotions subside and are set aside, they are going to start realizing what is the logical approach here, right? Because the whole idea of being a revert and wanting to be a housewife and wanting to be a mother at the age of 16 to 17, and sometimes I'm somebody that, if you know me personally, I live in the objective reality, right? I would say it's unrealistic, right? So the first thing that she needs to think about is, okay, if I'm not going to university, what other options do I have, right? And the whole idea of career, like, I feel like people need to live in reality, right? I'm the most neutral. I don't have any agendas and I don't have anything to sell you. So when someone asks me, what do you think about women being in education? I've always said to people, we live in a day and age where a man cannot afford to provide for the household in its entirety, right? If you look at the average, right? The middle class are the most squeezed demographic of people. They're the ones that are taxed the most, and they're the ones that are struggling the most, right? A lower class, they're lower class. Lower class has always existed. The upper class are thriving off the middle class. So my point to you is, we live in a day and age where education is a safety net for everyone, regardless of gender, first and foremost, right? So a girl as young as 16 and 17 saying that she doesn't want to go to, or she don't want to pursue education because she, again, this is me putting riba aside. I'm going to address it after. But if she doesn't want to kind of go down the education route because she wants to become a housewife, I think that's more of an emotional response due to the novelty of her coming into the religion. Because what ends up happening when someone reverts into the religion is, as you know, whenever you do something new or whenever you have a new experience, the emotions are very high, motivations are very high. So sometimes you may read something and take it literally as it is, right? Without applying context to it. Because the best reality, if we really think about it, if you speak to every single man, the reality is, oh, I wouldn't want my wife to work. I'm going to be the one that finances the house. I'm the one that's going to take care of the family. The woman just has to sustain the household. But how many people actually live like that? Let's be real. How many people in this day and age really live in that reality? Maybe less than 5%, right? In this modern day and age. So to kind of address the education part, the first thing I would say ultimately is, if you don't want to go to university, which I do agree, if you have an alternative choice, really think about it, right? There's apprenticeships. Apprenticeships are free, by the way. You just got to sign up, do an interview, and if they accept you, you're getting paid and you're not owing any money. So riba's out of the line, right? The concept of your father wanting to force you to go to university, parents only force people to do things because they think it is the best thing. If you give them an alternative, granted that you sit down with them and you really want them to, or you really want to show them the path that you want to take, they're most likely going to listen after a while. But to kind of circle back, because I've said a lot of things, I think there's two things that need to be addressed here. Number one is the emotions attached to the concept of wanting to be a housewife at the tender age of 17, right? Not realistic. Let's be honest. That's the advice I would give. It's not realistic, and really have more of a better action plan. Because the idea of being infatuated with the concept of wanting to be a housewife, fair enough, it can happen. There's probably a brother out there that would marry someone that turns 18. I'm not going to say it's impossible, but what position are you putting yourself in? End of the day, I'm of the mindset of, if a woman wants to go down the educational route, so be it, but it shouldn't be your long term. Your education should be something for you to prove to yourself that you have some level of competency. I feel like if you really weigh it out and you be a neutral here, this is me being a neutral. The thing that comes to my mind when I read this is, the person's emotional because they first came into the religion, so the motivation is high, emotions are high. They want to make sure they do everything to the T, number one. Number two, they face their first obstacle, which is, my parents said I have to go to university, and they're not with the idea of me being a housewife. Bear in mind, that is a perfectly logical response. If I went to my parents and I was a sister today, I was a girl. If I go to my mom today, I'm my dad, and I tell them, look, mom, I'm 16, 17 years old. I'm about to finish high school or college. And as soon as I finish, I want to be a housewife. I don't want to get education. There is no parent on this planet that's going to accept that. I'm going to be quite frank with you, right? So you have to tackle it from a realistic point of view. So for me personally, when I'm reading this message, all I'm thinking about is, again, the person clearly is having some sort of emotional reaction and they need some emotional tendering. You need to sit down with that person and really make them understand, okay, cool. It's good that you want to be a housewife. Long term, you can definitely be a housewife. I'm not against that. But if you are looking at the short term right now, you're just about finishing school. you're 18 years old. Realistically speaking, you might as well go figure out what you can be good at, what you're good at, right? But the idea and the infatuation of wanting to be a housewife sometimes, not all the time, sometimes is a nice cheat code or a nice way out when you just don't want to figure out what life has to offer to you. So my advice would genuinely be, if your parents are against it, try to find a middle ground. The best negotiation isn't a zero-sum game, by the way. It isn't you lose and I win. Sometimes a negotiation is when both parties come to a mutual decision, which is, you don't want me to go to university, fair enough. I'm not going to go to university because I don't want to take on board or take on riba, which is interest. Instead of going to university, you know what? I'm going to go do some sort of apprenticeship. I'm at least going to skill myself in something. Throughout her apprenticeship, if she finds somebody that she really likes or somebody that's interested in her, let's say she's at the age of 21, 22, the guy's a competent, capable guy, he's got things going for him, khalas, go get married, go be a housewife. But settling at that age logically makes no sense, and it is a losing battle. So that would be my advice.
Yeah. Essentially, my advice is pretty similar. Don't get riba if you don't have to. Why put yourself in haram? There's no barakah in that anyway. Don't be in mixed environments if you don't have to. It's haram. This is men and women. Try to avoid it. And sisters, there's ways for y'all to make money. I know a hairdresser who was making like $250,000 a year, bro. Never went to school, never went to uni, never got a degree. Because women drive the economy. You know that, bro.
Yeah.
Charge like $200 for like a hair consultation, to tell you what color is best on you, bro. Crazy. Allah Mabarak, right? Nail techs, lash techs, bro, they're making bank. Obviously, this may not be permissible, but you guys get what I mean. There's ways around it. There's a sister who bakes cupcakes, bro, in the UK, and she'll decorate them, and she's making like 400K a year. There's another sister who sells plant pots on Etsy, who's making 100K a year. Like, there's ways around it to have a little bit of a safety net and to just make money if you want it. But I think the extreme of it is what you have to avoid, which is when you go into marriage with that 1 foot in, 1 foot out mentality. That not if my husband leaves, when my husband leaves, when he's gonna get a second wife. First of all, why does a second wife mean it's the end of the game? Where did that come from? And there's definitely an extreme end to it. And it's like, even while you have kids, like, your priority is that, and it's like, then you've lost the plot. But to also just say women should just wholeheartedly go into being a housewife, being a mother, that's the goal, right? We don't live in that time. A lot of men are not stepping up and taking accountability. A lot of men want you to pay the bills. A lot of men want you to kind of be out there spreading your wings, so to speak, and they don't feel anything. They're dayuth. So what are you gonna do now? It's very idealistic for a lot of podcast bros to be like, oh, bro, just, it doesn't matter, then deal with it. It's like, bro, men are not stepping up. In an ideal world, right? In an ideal situation, in an Islamic idealized situation, you do not push your daughters to become the men that they should have, to then get married, and then again, Allah forbid, if they get divorced, you as a man step up, right? You take her back into your authority, because Allah says you're going to be the wali after that, right? If she's a single mom, and you take care of her, she's now your responsibility again. But most of the men today would rather, if anything happens, or when anything happens, so prepare for that, and then when that happens, you fend for yourself. When the scholars are of the opinion, bro, that it's haram for a woman to even live by herself because there's no mahram. So how are you expecting her to fend by herself, bro? There's no rahma anymore. So I do think that these two extremes need to be mitigated. The extreme of men that are kind of like, oh, it's okay, bro, like, or to a woman, you're 16, 15, you don't have any experience, you want to be a housewife, just do it. Bismillah, have your tawakkul in Allah. And you should have your tawakkul in Allah, bro. But there's wolves out here. There's wolves out here that they have 4 wives back home, and they come here and they're gonna tell you, they got no wife, they'll marry you, and then they'll up and leave you. That does happen. I'm not saying it's gonna happen every time, but it does happen. So it's way too naive to just prescribe, oh, just go with it, and whatever happens, happens. It's like, bro, you're wasting your chastity, which is extremely valuable. No, you don't know what's gonna happen. And then there's another extreme of like dads that are like, your husband will leave you, and for that day, spend your whole life to become a gynecologist, because there's a shortage of female gynecologists apparently in the West. which I've
Correct.
still yet to find the statistics. I was talking about that with IronFit coaching last week. 85% of obstetrics and gynecology residents and specialists are women, bro. So there's no shortage, sweetheart, of female gynecologists. Yeah, maybe there's perhaps not Muslima gynecologists, right?
Yeah.
But I hate this argument from a lot of the simps. They'll say, "Oh, would you want your wife looked at by a male?" It's like, no, bro. There's 85% of female doctors are female.
Yeah.
When did it say it has to be a Muslima? You know, a kafira can still deliver your baby, bro. Last time I checked.
Yeah. It's true. It's true, and everything you said is factual. I think the main taking point from this is we need to live in an idealistic society, right? I feel like it is nice to say the things that the dream reality would look like, right? Men being the providers and the guardians of the galaxy, as they say, and women being the housewives. That's literally the ideal reality. But look outside. Like all of these guys on the internet, even Hero that you had on last week, that's the thing that I disagree with what he said, right? It is nice to say, but if you look outside and you look at the objective reality, if it doesn't correspond, then your point doesn't matter. And that's what I always tell people. The day masculinity, true masculinity is restored, right? None of these guys on the internet, right? Just true masculinity, which is men taking care of their homes, which then constitutes and contributes to a fully functioning community. The day that is restored, you're going to see women crawl back into their feminine nature and become housewives. But until then, if we look at most households, as you said, most modern day households in the West, for the most part, women and men are doing this 50-50 policy. You do this, I do this. I pay the bills, you do this. If you pay the bills or you do this, I'll do the chores or whatever it may be, right? As long as we live in that reality, all of these things are nice to say. The idea of, oh, like if you're 16, 17, don't be a housewife. Go be a housewife and go settle and go live happily ever after. Doesn't work. So for me, I always tell people context is very important here. Context is very important here. And the fact that we live in the West kind of speaks for itself, right? We don't live in a Muslim country. Like, for example, I live in the UAE, for anyone that doesn't know. This is me going on a tangent. Most women here...
Subtle flex. Allah Mubarak.
Allah, I mean. Nah, because the UAE or the Gulf countries have preserved the nature of femininity. They've preserved it, right? Women don't work. They've probably never had a job in their lives. The locals, by the way, like the Emiratis or the Saudis, maybe not Saudis, but Emiratis and the Qataris, right? They've never had a job in their life. Like, women don't know what it's like to work. All they do is look pretty, go to the market, go buy their stuff, go back home, right? Again, you can have your own reserved views on it, but for the most part, they've maintained the idea of a man works, a woman never works. And that's what they've maintained. And you can kind of see the way they kind of conduct themselves. The women in the UAE are very, very feminine. They're very feminine, right? Whereas in the West, unfortunately, the reality is when you're forced to go into work, when you're forced to uphold yourself to a certain standard and you're constantly battling with men, you end up developing masculine traits. That's just a fact, right? Which the sad reality is, because of the world we live in, most women then take those masculine traits that they had to uphold themselves to in the world of being a boss babe, as they say, or being a bad, or whatever they call it, or being an independent woman, right? They then take those masculine traits into the marriage, and then the masculine man and the masculine traits of the women are what are battling each other. It's what's fighting each other. And that's why most marriages sometimes just falter. So again, it's very difficult to point a finger at something and say that's the place to change it. Just the reality is context is very important. You really have to look at the context of the situation the person's in and be realistic. I'm not somebody that is dampening someone's dreams. I'm not going to crush your ambitions, but you also have to tap into the objective reality. And from this DM, I can tell you for free, the person's having an emotional reaction and they need someone to really sit down with them and discuss the alternatives that they have.
Bro, spot on. And sis, may Allah make it easy for you. But trust me when I tell you this, as soon as you reached out, I knew from what you were saying about your dad, even how, like, looking at it as, oh, that's your problem. I guess it's your problem. Like, sure, it sounds harsh, but imagine how emotionally charged he is to say something like that to you. Like, his whole world is colliding, bro. I've had reverts, bro, that accept the deen. Allahumma barik, may Allah bless them and keep them steadfast. And their parents are like, "You're not my son anymore." It's like, it sounds harsh, bro. I understand that. I'm not saying that it's forgivable if you take that at face value. But why are you taking that at face value? Their entire world is crumbling in front of their own eyes. They've
Yeah.
not only lost their son, even though he's alive and he's well, Allahumma barik, they've lost the hopes of the son that they thought he would become, that
Yeah.
he would be a good person, because they conflate Islam with the Fox News narrative, right? So now all of a sudden, when's the flight to Syria now for him? You know, like they're the gears are turning, bro, in their mind. So you can't really blame them. Like, yeah, I get it. It's like your dad saying, sure, it's not, it's your problem. You got to deal with it. It sounds harsh, and it is harsh, but it's just emotional. In that moment, he's just going through it, and he doesn't know how to process it. So
Yeah.
he's being short with you because he's kind of lost his patience. He's like, I raised my daughter 15, 16, 17 years to be smart and intelligent, not in like a careerist sense, but just to be wise, to be just good, right? And
Yeah.
just. And all of a sudden, she wants to pick the worst possible option. What is going on? Like, it's very new to him, bro. And the Prophet
Yeah.
ﷺ mentioned that Islam will return to something strange as it once was. So
Exactly.
we are going to be, as he said, glad tidings to strangers, we are going to be the strangers, inshallah. That's an honor. So being in this situation is a really good problem to have. And sometimes, like, I ask myself, like, wondering if the predicament that I'm in, why am I getting put through? It's like, what a beautiful test, bro, to be put through, instead of like something harsh. I was walking home a few days ago with my family, and it was at night, and there was like a chopper coming, like over, probably like airlifting some patient to like a nearby hospital. And I was
Yeah.
just thinking, it was like really loud, right? And I was just thinking, I was like, subhanallah, like, imagine the skies in like Philistine. You just hear like
Yeah.
jets and just planes, and just you just hear like drones, and it's like it's the worst sounds you can imagine, bro. You just grow like your ear is probably ringing, bro, 24 damn 7, right? Like, just
Yeah.
these are real issues, bro. And I'm not trying to mitigate your issue at all, sis, but I'm thinking to myself that, like, what an honor to have this test. And the truth is usually somewhere in the middle. Because when you're in one extreme, everything else, including the middle, seems like it's in another extreme. And when you're in the other extreme, everything else seems like it's in the other extreme. So when you're in the middle, you realize there is some validity to what your parents are saying, right? In terms of
Yeah.
your only value being from this, no, that's false. You don't need me to tell you that. Allah tells you that, right? Our only value is in our iman, in our acts of worship, in our good deeds, in our belief. And as the Prophet ﷺ, by extension, showed us that a woman should serve her house and her husband. That's her responsibility.
Yeah.
Like, that's her priority. There's no other way to put it. Doesn't mean there can't be one woman who can become a gynecologist in the community. Sure, there's like one woman. Do you get what I mean? And it doesn't
Yeah.
mean like one woman wasn't like in the wars at the time of the Prophet. I understand that completely. It doesn't mean every woman needs to do that. Do you get what I mean? So
Yeah.
there is some truth to it, but a balanced approach is what's needed. And the practical advice is, as the brother already mentioned earlier, that look into alternatives, because the alternative will allow you to stay away from haram, stay away from riba most of the time, inshallah, avoid free mixing. But then the end goal of what you get out of it is what your parents and what your family intended, which is a little bit of a safety net or security. And I
Yeah.
wouldn't be telling you this advice if you were 30, by the way. Just understand that. We're telling you this now because you're 16, 17. A lot of women nowadays don't understand the reality of what it takes to even be a housewife. They think it's
Facts.
like, oh, I just want to be a housewife, like it'll be easy. Bro, it's not easy. Trust me.